This is 9 News with Davina Smith.
Good morning. Let's go straight to our special coverage of the royal tour. This morning, the King and Queen have already been out and about in official duties. It was Camilla that we saw first this morning, visiting Oz Harvest. The Queen herself is a patron of the UK equivalent, and she spent some time there cooking with the chefs before the King then moved on to the National Centre for Indigenous Excellence, meeting with elders after a traditional welcome. And we have live pictures coming into our newsroom right now, so bear with us because the camera is a little bit all over the place. We are waiting for the Queen to arrive at Green Square Library, where the focus in the next hour will very much be on writing and literature. She will award the 4 young winners of the Queen's Commonwealth Essay Competition, the world's oldest international writing competition. Then they head to Parramatta Park, where the New South Wales Premier is throwing a barbecue for their Majesties, putting Western Sydney's multiculturalism on full display. Their final engagements in Australia this afternoon, Sydney putting on a sparkler for thousands to meet the King and Queen at the Opera House. Today's Lara Vella was among those very early starters getting excited.
Well, throngs of royal fans are expected to pack the forecourt of Sydney's Opera House today to catch their glimpse of the King and Queen in what will be their largest and their last public meet and greet as part of the royal tour. It's Western Sydney's turn to host their Majesties at a huge community barbecue showcasing the best of modern Australia, including a sheepdog demonstration, an Aussie sanger, and who knows which animals might sneeze on the King today. Then, just after 4 p.m, the couple will head to the Opera House, an opportunity for Sydney to say farewell to their Majesties and witness a moment in history.
We went and saw the coronation last year, and we travelled all around London and tried to see him, but we couldn't, so it'd be great if we could see him today, yeah.
I personally love them. I think most Americans love them. Obviously, we're not under their rulings of any kind, so, but for the most part, yeah, we're a lot of royal followers in America.
Who's excited to see the King and Queen? Me! Why would you like to see the King and Queen today?
Because they're important people. Yeah.
And what about you, honey?
Because they're important and everybody knows them.
It's really a great honour to have performing for the King and Queen, and the girls are so excited.
They'll end the day with a review of the Royal Australian Navy and also a flypast by the Australian Air Force, including a cheership salute from more than 600 officers. No doubt a fitting way to wrap up what has been a whirlwind tour down under.
And we'll have more special coverage of the Royals to come across the morning and take you there live as events happen. But let's turn to a developing story in Adelaide now this morning, where the young driver who killed the son of South Australia's Police Commissioner has been sentenced. Beth Excel was in court for us. Beth, he has avoided a jail term.
That's right, he has, Davina. He was handed a suspended sentence, which means that as long as he's of good behaviour for the next 2 years, then he won't have to serve any of the jail term of just over a year that he was given this morning. The 19-year-old walked from court here only a short time ago free. He had his mother by his side. She's been at every single one of his appearances with him. Neither of them appeared to have any reaction inside the courtroom as that sentence was handed down. They were ushered quite quickly out of there. It comes almost exactly a year since this tragic crash, which Dhiren Randhawa pleaded guilty to. 18-year-old Charlie Stevens was celebrating schoolies on the South Australian South Coast when Randhawa hit him with his car. The court has previously heard he was trying to avoid pedestrians on the other side of the road and simply didn't see Charlie walking there. The 18-year-old died in hospital from his injuries the following day. Now, the Stevens family filled the public gallery this morning along with a number of Charlie's friends. Outside court, the Commissioner spoke to the media. He said they're grateful that the court process is now over.
So the judge, during her summing up, said today that no matter what happens in the courtroom today, it's not going to change anything for our family, and I think that's a very true statement. We're grateful that this part of the entire process is over. Each court date that's come up has been difficult, stressful and emotional for our family.
Now, Dhiren Randhawa was facing the possibility of deportation. That is now off the table. We understand now that he's received a suspended sentence, although he is banned from getting behind the wheel for a decade from today. And the sentencing judge, as she summed up, said this is a sobering reminder for all drivers of the consequences of driving without due care. Davina.
Beth, thank you. A disqualified driver is in custody after allegedly running from the scene of a fatal crash in Western Sydney. Police say officers were following the vehicle moments before but insist they hadn't been pursuing it. Jack Hahn reports.
Well, the Great Western Highway here in the suburb of St Mary's was closed for much of the morning after a deadly crash. About 4 o'clock, police say that they were patrolling Mamray Road when they noticed a dark-coloured Holden stopped on the road. They approached but insist that they did not activate their lights and sirens. Nonetheless, the Holden takes off, and the next time it is seen is seconds later, smashing into a Toyota Corolla, killing the innocent motorist driving the Corolla, a man believed to be aged in his 40s. Police then say the person behind the wheel of the Holden jumps out of the vehicle and tries to run away from the law. Locals saying his efforts even saw him jumping through backyards and over fences to get away from police, but officers were able to catch up with him a few streets later and placed a 42-year-old man under arrest. Right now, he is undergoing mandatory testing at the Payne hospital.
The incident has been declared a critical incident. It's now the circumstances relative to the crash and the causation of the crash are now being investigated by an independent police area command with a number of layers and levels of oversight that will monitor the investigation per se.
This major arterial route for Western Sydney was closed right through the morning peak, causing huge traffic headaches. At one point, the traffic jam on the alternative route, the M4, stretched more than 20 kilometres.
3 people, including 2 paramedics, have been rushed to hospital in Brisbane this morning following a terrifying crash. A Queensland ambulance service vehicle was travelling lights and sirens through a busy intersection at Albany Creek Road at Bridgeman Downs when it collided with a blue SUV, flipping onto its side. All 3 were treated for minor injuries. Both cars have now been removed from the scene. A day before the arrival of new club coach Michael Maguire, the Broncos are in crisis as the club awaits the results of a secondary drug test for Ezra Mam. The mother, injured in the car crash that captured the nation, has spoken out. Bailey Kenzie reports from Broncos HQ.
The family involved in a head-on collision with Broncos star Ezra Mam have spoken out in an exclusive interview with 9 News. The mother, who sat in the back of that Uber, says that she has been left traumatised and unable to sleep following the ordeal. Sitting down to tell her story yesterday afternoon, she says her 4-year-old daughter was left with a fractured hip and seatbelt burns.
I can remember looking up and straight away I seen this car veer straight in front of us and I knew what was going to come next. And that's when the vehicle hit us.
While she confirmed club CEO Dave Donaghy has reached out to them, she says Ezra Mam did not speak to them at the scene of the crash and has not reached out since.
I can't rest because every time I close my eyes, all I see is that vehicle. But not just only that, the impact that it's had on my family.
Her extended family have also released a statement to 9 News, partly directed at Ezra Mam, who police allege returned a positive roadside drug test after crossing onto the wrong side of the road and colliding with the Uber. In that statement, they say, "You have been given an opportunity not afforded to many people. Your talent is exceptional and I've found myself on many occasions cheering you on. Your life in football has given you many opportunities and rewards to go with that, but it also means you are required to show appreciation for the privilege of playing your game by being that much more responsible."
People need to hear my side of the story, basically, because when I watch the news that I've seen, there's not been one thing mentioned about my Uber driver or us that were involved in the accident. And I think people need to hear my side of the story.
The manager of Ezra Mam has released a statement saying Ezra is extremely remorseful, concerned and, first and foremost, for the other parties involved and understands the enormity of the current situation, confirming he is now seeking professional treatment. Speaking on Breakfast Radio yesterday, club CEO Dave Donaghy said that Ezra Mam appears to have lost his way, but the club, the NRL and the police will all now be awaiting the results of a secondary drug test before any further potential steps are taken.
Still to come, a deadly strike on a hospital in the south of the Lebanese capital. Now, what will be the fallout? A stark warning. US presidential candidate Camilla Harris told what happens if President Trump will win the election. And this is a live look at Green Square Library in Sydney, where Camilla has just arrived. The focus of the next hour, being on awarding young writers and also meeting Australia's most famous authors. More after the break. Let's take you back live to Green Square Library in Sydney, where Queen Camilla is spending the morning with some students. The focus very much on writing and literature, and we've seen her sit down with a group of students just before. It was young Maya, I believe, who the Queen asked, "Would you like to read to me?" And without a single stumble, there's Maya there. She read beautifully for the Queen, and the words from the Queen were, "That was brilliant." She got a round of applause. The Queen's now moved across to a separate table in the library there, where she's speaking with some more students. From there, she will be presenting the winners of the Queen's Commonwealth Essay Competition their certificates for 2023 and 2024. So there are 2 students from Sydney, from Australia, who won last year and 2 this year. The essay competition is the oldest essay competition for students in the world, and what the students were asked to write about this year has been our common wealth. Common being split and wealth being 2 separate words. And the students were asked to write about economic growth, climate change and how they could find solutions. So 2 Australian students from this year and 2 from last year being awarded for their work and their words. And then from there, she's going to spend some time with the who's who of Australian literature, some of our most famous and celebrated authors and novelists, and we'll have that for you coming up very soon. But these pictures are from Sydney at Green Square Library and the Queen. Let's go to Annalise Bolt now, who's at Kirribilli. It'll be the last chance for Australian fans to get a chance to see the pair before they leave tomorrow. Annalise, huge crowds expected there this afternoon, and the weather could not be better.
Yes, Davina, isn't it a beautiful day down here on Sydney Harbour? Fit for a king and queen, I'd say. And this really is going to be the grand finale of their royal tour at 4:30 this afternoon. His and Her Majesty will greet crowds on the steps of the Opera House. They'll be joined by the Premier Chris Minns as well as his wife Anna. There'll also be a surprise performance from 100 school students who are expected to sing a song. It's titled Follow Your Dreams. The last time we saw a reigning monarch at the Opera House was Queen Elizabeth back in 2006, so it's really set to be a moment in history. If you're hoping to catch a glimpse of the royals yourself, the advice is come down as early as possible. The gates open at 3 this afternoon. Afterwards, they'll be taking a tour of the Naval Fleet. They'll be joined by the Governor-General, as well as the Chief of the Navy and the Chief of the Defence Force. There'll be a flyover from the RAAF. They did do a rehearsal yesterday, and it's looking absolutely spectacular. There, they'll be greeted by 600 sailors and officers, so expect plenty of pomp and pageantry. They'll also be boarding a ship and setting sail on Sydney Harbour. It's the perfect way to say goodbye to the harbour city before they fly out to Samoa tomorrow, Davina.
And well done, Annalise. The backdrop is absolutely spectacular. You've done a great job organising that for them. Thank you very much. We'll have more on the royal tour ahead, but for now let's turn to the war in the Middle East, where at least 4 people have been killed, including a child, in an Israeli airstrike right near the entrance of a large hospital. It's in the south of the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Another 24 people have been injured. The latest strike is not the hospital Israel promised it would target, despite it allegedly housing a Hezbollah bunker containing cash and gold. Our Europe correspondent Edward Godfrey filed this report a little earlier.
The strikes on Beirut were enormous, and vision of the aftermath reveals the level of destruction. More than a dozen targets were hit by Israeli airstrikes. The IDF says they were going after financial institutions Hezbollah uses to fund its activities. Since then, a strike in Damascus has killed at least 2 people. Israeli forces say one of those killed was Hezbollah's head of money transfers in Syria. Earlier, Israeli forces have released a video animation. They believe a Hezbollah bunker belonging to slain leader Hassan Nasrallah lies underneath the Al Sahel hospital in Beirut, holding millions of dollars in cash and gold. The hospital's boss has said it has been evacuated. Israel says it won't be striking the hospital.
The Israeli Air Force is monitoring the compound, as you can see. However, we will not strike the hospital itself. I want to emphasize, we are not at war with the people of Lebanon. We are at war with Hezbollah.
The US is sending senior officials to the Middle East to try and broker once again some sort of a ceasefire. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due to arrive in Israel. He'll be meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. One of the topics being discussed, you'd expect, would be the leaking of secret details of Israel's impending military response to Iran.
A partial autopsy of Liam Payne's body has shown the former One Direction singer had a number of drugs in his system at the time of his death. They include pink cocaine, usually a mixture of substances like methamphetamine, ketamine and MDMA. The 31-year-old died last week after falling from a third-floor hotel balcony in Argentina. The sexual abuse allegations keep piling up against Sean Diddy Coombs, with several new lawsuits now filed against him by 4 men and 3 women. One accuser claims she was 13 when Coombs allegedly drugged and assaulted her in the year 2000. At least 24 people have now come forward with sexual abuse allegations. A car slammed into a home in the US, crashing through a wooden fence into the roof of the home in Southern California. The driver injured and trapped in the tangled wreckage before being taken to hospital. A woman who lives in the home, which has an unexpected skylight, says the impact of the crash sounded like an explosion. With just 2 weeks to go until America's presidential election, Kamala Harris has issued a stark warning over the possibility of a Trump return to the White House. This report from US correspondent Jonathan Kersley.
The Vice President was on a mission in the battleground states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin and Michigan, joined by Republican Liz Cheney, as the pair issued their own warnings over the possibility of a Trump presidency.
When Donald Trump says that his political opponents are the enemy within, and when he contemplates deploying force against them, the response that we all have should not be to be so afraid we don't act. It should be vote him out.
In many, many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man, but the consequences of him being president of the United States are brutally serious.
The unusual pairing of the Republican and the Democrat is a big bid to lure Republican voters who backed Nikki Haley in the primary contest and turn them away from Donald Trump. But the Vice President has been answering questions after Donald Trump's repeated, unproven claim she never worked at McDonald's.
As my president, did you work at a McDonald's?
Donald Trump went from commander-in-chief yesterday to today, a disaster zone visit, campaigning in North Carolina and rallying his faithful.
I will end inflation, I will stop the invasion, and I will bring back the American dream.
In the final stretch of this campaign, polls in the 7 crucial states have this race neck and neck.
Still to come, a scary landing on a Qantas flight to Perth, what passengers were ordered to do right before hitting the ground. And Steve Smith tells us why he's happy to move back down the batting order ahead of the Test summer. Plus, these pictures just in, the King is on the move, heading to his next engagement in Glebe in Sydney before a spectacular barbecue in Parramatta. We'll have all the highlights of the Royal Tour coming up next. Steve Smith will return to number 4 in the batting order in the summer against India. The former captain has revealed it was actually his Test teammates Usman Khawaja and Marnus Labuschagne who pushed for the change.
I think just conversations we had after New Zealand with particularly Marnus and Uzi, they hated me up top, to be honest. They wanted me behind them, so that was a big part of it. And then obviously I've got a decent record at 4, so it was kind of, it was good fun having a crack at something new.
Smith is playing in the New South Wales Shield match against Victoria at the MCG. The Vics lead by 300 runs early on day 3. The Kangaroos fly to Christchurch today for their Pacific Championships clash against the Kiwis. Harry Grant says Australia won't target Shaun Johnson, despite the playmaker coming out of retirement to play.
He's the highest class player, world-class player. You just got to respect what he's done in the game, and he gets to pull the black and black and silver, black and white on it again. So I think, like I said, it's an incredible feat for him to put his hand up and represent his country.
You can watch the Pacific Championships live and free on 9. Cox Plate contender Via Sistina is in doubt for Saturday's race after a scary incident at track work this morning. Star jockey James McDonald was thrown from the saddle, but both rider and horse are okay. Tony Jones has more from Moonee Valley.
Well, it was a dramatic morning to say the least here at Moonee Valley. We saw it very early in the piece, this drama unfold, when Via Sistina came around the turn. You can see here she just loses her footing somewhat, dislodging the jockey James McDonald. Now, while McDonald was able to get to his feet, Via Sistina stayed on her feet, and that was the real worry here in many respects, because she then completed another 3 laps of the course, which is hardly the ideal preparation heading into the Cox Plate. And you can see by these pictures here, it was real heart-in-the-mouth stuff as stable staff formed something of a human barrier across the track to try and stop her each time she came around. Eventually, she simply ran out of puff and was able to be apprehended and brought back safely to the stalls, where Chris Waller, the master trainer, himself hosed her down, calmed her down. Vets then checked her just to make sure everything was okay. And from what Chris Waller told us a little later, she is A-OK at the moment.
She doesn't have a hair missing. There's no blood. No skin off. We've had our vet look at her, Racing Victoria vet. Our vet's been over her thoroughly, and I've been over as well, and I can't believe. Firstly, when I first saw it, I feared the worst, that something tragically might have gone wrong. And you take comfort from that that hasn't happened and that she's safe.
As for jockey James McDonald, who is the face of the Cox Plate Carnival this year, he's gunning for his 100th Group 1 victory. So this was hardly the ideal preparation for him also. But we spoke to him, and although he is nursing a very, very sore hip, which will be assessed by doctors today, he too is set to go. But it was a very scary experience.
She didn't come down. She only had a little trip, and she seemed to be cantering around fine afterwards. And as long as she's pulled up well, that's the most important thing.
So as it stands at the moment, Chris Waller has accepted for Via Sistina. In terms of further work this week, well, she certainly won't gallop on Thursday. Instead, there'll be a gentle walk and a swim down the beach. And maybe it's the start of what's going to be quite a remarkable story come Saturday in the Cox Plate.
The best players in world tennis will soon to head to Australia. Women's number 3 Coco Gauff will spearhead Team USA in the United Cup, with the top seeds facing Canada and a qualifier in Perth.
I think it's going to benefit her because she'll get those guaranteed matches against 2 other, even just in the group stages. But yeah, I think her and Taylor Fritz are definitely one of the favourites. They're both well established on tour, but as a team, I think they're going to combine really well.
Naomi Osaka's season is over early. The 2-time Aussie Open champion has withdrawn from the Billie Jean King Cup finals due to torn muscles in her abdomen. Well, let's take you back to live pictures of Queen Camilla, who is at Green Square Library in Sydney, and she's presenting the winners of the Queen's Commonwealth Essay Competition with their certificates. The winners from 2023 and 2024. We have 11-year-old Ira, 10-year-old Ezra, and from this year the winners, 18-year-old Yihan and 13-year-old Atia, who have been awarded their certificates. It is the world's oldest essay competition. It's been running since the late 1800s, where the students every year are asked and encouraged to write about something that is significant to the Commonwealth. And this year they were asked, well, the topic was Our Common Wealth, to talk about economic growth across all of the Commonwealth, including Pacific Island nations, climate change, and also getting the students to think about possible solutions to some of those problems. The Queen is a passionate advocate for reading and literature. She once wrote to me, "Reading is a great adventure. I've loved it since I was very small and would love everyone else to enjoy it as much as I do." She also has her very own online book club, and that's where we will see her in a few moments' time, where she moves into a new space and will meet with some of the who's who of Australian authors, so stay tuned for that. Also, making news coming up after the break, Senator Lidia Thorpe makes international headlines over yesterday's outburst. We'll have the latest from Canberra over her controversial protest. And looking for help with your phone bill? Well, how Telstra plans to help those struggling to make ends meet. As we wait and watch for the King and Queen to travel through Sydney's west for a barbecue for the ages, there is still reaction pouring in on Lidia Thorpe's protest against King Charles after the controversial senator interrupted a Parliament House event by shouting anti-colonial protests in the capital. We'll go live to our political reporter Amanda Cobb. Amanda, just talk us through what's been said today.
Davina, politicians from across the political divide have come out this morning against Lidia Thorpe's actions, condemning her behaviour and saying it's brought shame to the Parliament and doesn't reflect broader Australian opinions. That was after she stood up and shouted inside the Great Hall in Parliament House, where King Charles was addressing politicians and prominent Australians. Here are some of her political colleagues reacting this morning.
It was pretty disrespectful, not just to the King, but to the many great Australians that had gathered in the Great Hall.
The way Lidia Thorpe conducts herself brings shame upon the Parliament, the Senate, and those she pretends to represent who are so dismayed by having somebody engage in that type of way.
The opposition leader Peter Dutton has this morning called for Lidia Thorpe to resign, saying someone who doesn't believe in the Australian political system as it stands shouldn't be in Parliament. Some Liberals are considering a censure motion against her in Parliament, which doesn't have any real consequences for her, but would essentially be an official condemnation of her behaviour. But Lidia Thorpe is not backing down. Speaking to British media overnight, here she is on Sky News UK.
I'm not fussed about what people say about me. I will continue to fight for justice for my people. We are the real sovereigns in this country. The King is not our sovereign. The King lives in your country. He's from your country. He can't be our king.
Davina, this isn't the first time Lidia Thorpe has had these kinds of run-ins, causing controversy when she initially refused to swear allegiance to the Queen when she first became a senator. But as an elected representative, she's got another 3 years in Parliament left. Davina?
OK, Amanda, thank you. Well, passengers have been forced to get into the brace position for landing after a Qantas flight from Perth was diverted thanks to mechanical issues. More from Emma Griffiths.
Well, it was no doubt a frightening experience for those on board, with a priority landing taking place due to a mechanical issue. QF 1624 taking off from Perth Airport last night to Paraburdoo, but it had to make that stop at Geraldton Airport with police and paramedics waiting on the tarmac for passengers. Thankfully, no one needed their services and the flight was brought back here to Perth Airport. Now, a Qantas spokesperson has since released a statement saying it was no doubt an unsettling experience for those on board, but has thanked everyone for their patience. Passengers even taking to online describing the flight as a roller coaster, and others saying they had to get into the brace position. Now, passengers will be reaccommodated onto new flights from Perth to Paraburdoo over the course of today.
OK, let's go back to the royal tour. The Queen this morning has just moments ago met with famous Australian author Liane Moriarty. You can't quite see it in the shot there, but they were deep in conversation. Liane Moriarty has sold 20 million books worldwide, famous for her fiction novels. The latest one out at the moment, Here One Moment, so it'll be interesting to see if the Queen has read that. She's also made famous by Big Little Lies. There's Liane Moriarty right there. The book that was picked up by Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman and turned into a series. So it'll be interesting to see if the Queen is a... She was also deep in conversation with Mr Thomas Keneally, who is another famous Australian writer. And these are live pictures coming in from Glebe, where the King is attending his function today. It's the Cowper Street development in Glebe. It will be 75 new social apartments and terrace houses that will be developed in that area, with the Premier Chris Minns to the right of your screen there. It's been developed in coordination with the King's Trust. So these are apartments that will be having cross-laminated timber structures, rooftop gardens, solar power, on-site bike parking, green space, water retention, all to have the highest sustainability rates in the country in terms of an event. He's having a little bit of laugh there with Julie Bishop, the former Foreign Minister. They go way back, so a nice catch-up for them this morning. And this will be the official opening of the actual project doesn't open itself until next year sometime, but some official proceedings there as the King takes a particular notice and attention to sustainable housing in Australia, but also the environmental work that's going on behind the scenes to make this a sustainable project as well. Around 160 60 people will call this space home when it opens next year. It's about 75 social apartments and terrace houses in the heart of Sydney, making it more affordable and easier for people to live in around the inner city. Anthony Albanese there for the opening as well. And the Queen back at Green Square Library, where lots of children are sitting there, hopefully getting a chance to catch up with her and speak about her passion for essay writing and literature. She will move on and talk a little bit about the Queen's Reading Room, which was effectively an online book club that was launched in 2021 when she was the Duchess of Cornwall. It's now become a charity that provides books to the needy and encourages people to read. She also provides her own reading recommendations, what she's deep in reading at the moment and what she recommends to other people. And in the process of doing that, she will move outside and meet with some more famous Australian authors. So it will be interesting to see what she's reading at the moment and who she is starstruck by. Also coming up, a man found stabbed in his car in a suburban car park. We'll have those details for you next. Also, supermarkets tricking customers. What new court documents reveal about Coles and Woolworths and their tactics. A man has been stabbed in a Western Sydney car park this morning. Police say he was found in a car with injuries to his chest at Marylands just before 2 a.m. after being approached by up to 5 people who then fled the scene. The man was taken to hospital but not in a serious condition. 2 tobacco shops have been destroyed by fire in Melbourne. Emergency services were called to Frankston and Thornbury just after 4:30 this morning. Both blazes are right now being treated as suspicious. No one was inside either of the businesses at the time. Well, just 4 days out from the Queensland state election, new polling shows Labor is closing the gap on the LNP, ahead 53 to 47 on a two-party preferred basis. The opposition leader admitting this morning on Today that the race will be incredibly close.
My opponents have run a very vicious scare campaign. They've put out some things that are deliberately untrue. Now, we've chosen hope over fear.
David Crisafulli standing firm. His party is remaining focused on delivering their proposed solutions and wants Queenslanders to ask themselves whether they want a change. Well, people who suffer hearing loss as they get older are more likely to go on to develop Parkinson's disease. That's according to a new international study. Researchers who conducted the study on US veterans say if the hearing loss itself isn't addressed, the risk of developing Parkinson's is reduced. Well, millions of dollars of phone credit will be available to those struggling to make ends meet. Telstra is increasing its top-up prepaid recharge program to $180, which includes unlimited calls, SMS, and 70 gigabytes of data for 6 months. Customers facing homelessness, domestic violence or financial strife are eligible. The extent of Coles and Woolworths discount schemes has been revealed in new court documents lodged by the regulator. Christina Hearn has more.
More than 500 regular grocery items across Coles and Woolworths have been given fake discounts. That's according to court documents lodged by the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission to the Federal Court. According to the Australian, Raid Mozzie Spray topped the list for Woolies, given the discount price 39% above the regular cost. For Coles, Dettol hand wash was given the discount price 36% above the original price. Last month, the ACCC launched their case against the supermarket giants, alleging they breached consumer law by misleading customers on discounts. It's alleged Coles and Woolies inflated prices for a period of time and then discounted them under the down, and prices drop promotions, still well above the original cost. Woolies says it will review the claims. Coles says it will fight them.
Up next, tobacco wars in Melbourne inflame. 2 more shops destroyed by fire, both being treated as suspicious. And your front row seat to the Royal Tour, we are following the King and Queen all morning, and you are looking now at Parramatta Park, where they will be arriving shortly for a great Aussie barbecue. You're not going to miss anything. 9 years after the break. Let's take you back to the Royal Tour, where King Charles and Queen Camilla are in Sydney today, meeting and greeting locals and spending time with causes very close to their heart. And this was Queen Camilla just a few moments ago at the Green Square Library in Sydney, where she has met with some of Australia's most famous, celebrated authors, and she's also met with some up-and-coming stars. Take a look at the moment when she sat down with a few young children.
Would any of you like to read something to me? I'd love to hear your stories.
Nobody is hearing me, I say, annoyed after reading the letter the government sent me. Do you want to read it? We'll prepare to start crying. Dear Indie Shepherds, we hear you want to save the ocean and the sea.
You're looking at young Maya there reading for Queen Camilla. She did not skip a beat. That was the reception. Queen Camilla saying she was absolutely brilliant. It was a very special moment. Royal commentator Victoria Arbiter is watching along with us this morning. Victoria, this was such a special occasion for the Queen, for some of Australia's most acclaimed and successful authors, but also those young kids. Can you give us the backstory behind the Queen's passion for writing and reading?
Oh, gladly. And yes, I think this young reader, she's going to remember that moment forever. Who gets to read for the Queen? And actually that moment reminded me immediately of an initiative that the Queen has overseen in the UK called Silver Stories. And the programme pairs young children with much older people, the goal being to reduce loneliness in older people and allow children to practice their reading skills. And so young children will read to older people, and there's just a shared joy in that connection. And I think it really speaks to the Queen's passion for reading. This is something she has spoken about for years. She said as a young girl herself, she would lose herself in the pages of a book. She loved Black Beauty in particular, and she's really not particular about what she reads. Some would think that she's only reading the highbrow classics, but she loves a good beach read as well. So I suspect she's fangirling over meeting those Australian authors today, because it really ticks every box in terms of her own personal passions. She's also talked a lot in the past about how brilliant the King is reading Harry Potter to all the grandchildren. She says he does all of the voices and they just sit captivated. And I think that's really what she's trying to promote with literacy, is allowing people to escape into the pages of a book. And I don't think anyone could have imagined the book club that she started in the pandemic, really as just a bit of escapism for herself and the people that she knew liked to read, would become this global book club and this massive online community that has now evolved into a charity that is providing reading materials for people that wouldn't have access to those otherwise. And so fantastic that she's been able to really start today with one of her own passions and celebrating the works of great Australian authors, but allowing children to have their moment in the sun as well. It's been a great engagement.
We're looking at the live pictures now. She's just leaving the library there, where she, as you said, she has made a mark on the young people there, but also the very famous Australian writers. We know Leanne Moriarty is an incredibly famous, world-famous author, and she comes from Sydney. She's sold 20 million books worldwide. I'm a massive fan. I can imagine the Queen would have been fangirling too. They are page-turning books that you cannot put down, and she was deep in conversation with her. Leanne has a new book out at the moment, Here One Moment. It would be fascinating to know what they were talking about, Victoria.
Absolutely, and I'm almost certain Queen Camilla would have read that new book. I suspect she gets through books very quickly because she loves it so much. And of course, it was a very long plane journey from the UK to Australia. But I love that she has shared this passion because it gives us a little insight into who she is as well. She's talked about really loving the Jane Austen books. She visited Jane Austen's house in the UK and talked about everyone's love affair with Mr. Darcy. But she's also talked about the kind of popular fiction books that she loves as well, Where the Crawdads Sing, was an international bestseller. And so what I like as well is that she hasn't been very snooty with her picks. She has, of course, brought the classics to the masses, and it's so important that people have access to those books. But also she celebrates what us regular people like to read as well. It's a bit like some people getting a bit highbrow about the popcorn blockbuster blockbuster movies in the summer versus the ones that win Oscars. You know, there really is something for everyone, and I love that she has made that accessible to readers of all ages, from all different backgrounds and communities. She's also used this book club to promote authors from around the Commonwealth, and I think that's a fantastic way to use this platform, because there are authors that perhaps wouldn't have been known in other countries, and suddenly this global community is seeking out books by writers that are in Australia, in New Zealand, from across the African continent, from across Europe, and people are really getting an opportunity to stretch their reading likes, I suppose, as well. And so I think the Queen has really enjoyed that she's been able to give a platform to authors that perhaps wouldn't otherwise have been able to have their moment in the sun. On the Queen's Reading Room website, there are interviews with authors from all different backgrounds. There are people like Judi Dench reading aloud to people, and who doesn't want to be read to at night time by someone like Dame Judi Dench? So I think really what we have seen with this tour is the King and Queen wanting to get ahead their own interests and initiatives and passions and charitable endeavours, while also supporting the Australian community that they have been meeting. And I think that really has been achieved, particularly this morning.
Those pictures in particular, they gave me goosebumps. Like, I can imagine the pressure of being at a table where you're not sure you're going to get selected to read from the Queen. They obviously would have been given the heads up, the kids, that you might get a chance to do this. They didn't skip a beat, and she was genuinely engaged. She hung off every word that they read to her.
What a proud moment for that little girl. And yes, I think Queen Camilla will have been absolutely delighted to hear her reading with such confidence, because reading aloud, it promotes so many other skills. It builds confidence, it builds self-esteem, it gives children a sort of step up and a passion for reading themselves as well. And oh, she did so incredibly well. You can only imagine her parents that are watching with their jaws on the floor this morning. They didn't perhaps anticipate their daughter reading aloud to the Queen this morning. So I think this really does speak to an initiative that the Queen has been so eager to promote, and she has this fantastic platform, and she's using it to serve people from so many different age groups. And I think this too, it highlights the work of Silver Stories, because the Queen is 76. I don't know how old this little girl is, but she's not that old. And to be able to read to the Queen, it hopefully will encourage other school children to perhaps go to their local aged care homes or senior centres, or perhaps to read to their grandparents, because there's nothing older people delight in more than hearing children reading out loud. And when you can see that the Queen being so captivated when we know that the King is reading Harry Potter to his grandchildren, it's a shared love and an escapism that people are all able to enjoy together. So yes, I think the Queen is probably going on to her next engagement really quite tickled by the success of this morning.
I love the quote on the Queen's Reading Room website where she says, "You can escape and you can travel, you can laugh, you can cry. Every type of emotion, which is a human experience, is in a book." And she definitely has shared that with these children and with Australia's most celebrated authors today. Earlier this morning we saw her at Oz Harvest. Now, she's a patron for UK Harvest, which is a similar charity. It was really important work for her to be there today to talk about how there is so much food wastage in the world, and yet there are so many people who are hungry. This was another important cause close to her heart, wasn't it?
Hugely important, and this is an interest that she does share with the King as well, and he has overseen a number of initiatives in the UK designed to try and use food waste in ways that can benefit people in a number of different capacities. It's terrible, isn't it, that we can live in such an amazing country where there is so much available to everybody, and yet there's such a huge part of the world that has a terrible time trying to get food. And so again, this is something that is an amazing programme to highlight, and it gives people the opportunity to think about their own food waste. What can they do to eliminate that waste, to reduce that waste, or to use that waste in other ways so that it's not just going into landfills. So yes, this will have been very important, but it also will have been important because the Queen will have wanted to touch base with the charities for which she's patron. We saw that with Give It yesterday. Give It was her very first patronage here in Australia. She made a very sizable donation in 2020 when Give It was working hard to help communities that have been impacted by the terrible bushfires that were occurring at that time. And so I think for the Give It volunteers and staff members to finally be able to have that face-to-face interaction with the Queen will have been very significant. And the same this morning. These people are working behind the scenes. It's not often that they get the credit and the kudos and the pat on the back that they so deserve. So to be able to have that time with their patron will have been incredibly meaningful.
And not to overlook the King, but he's also had a busy morning working and getting some advice and education from Indigenous charities. He's also spent some time at a housing development, which is a social housing apartment that is under construction at the moment, that'll be opening next year as part of the King's Trust. But the next stop is a barbecue at Parramatta Park. So Victoria, do they like a snag or two?
Oh, I think so. Do you know, so famously, the royal family love a barbecue and they will do it in all weathers. So there's nothing quite like a big Aussie barbecue, but up in Balmoral, when they would be there in the Northern Hemisphere summer, so August into September, Prince Philip was always the one that was in charge of the barbecue. There's so many stories about them sitting out in the rain, the Queen, the late Queen, opening up the Tupperware containers with leftovers. So see, even she was very conscious of food waste as well. But yes, they love a barbecue. And so I think this is going to be a really wonderful way to celebrate Australia's cultural diversity, to talk about food waste. That continuing theme can go on at the barbecue as well. And also to celebrate the amazing quality food from across New South Wales that is being brought in to be cooked at this barbecue. Barbecues allow a sense of community for people from different backgrounds to come together, to chat over food, to enjoy each other over a meal. And I think the King and Queen, this is the kind of thing they really love to do, to get stuck in with the local community and chat to them. A bit like the Big Lunch. I don't know if you remember during the Platinum Jubilee, there was that big initiative. They had a huge picnic out in front of Buckingham Palace. And there's no better way really to bring communities together than to share a meal and break bread.
Well, that very much is about to happen, Victoria. We'll come back to you very shortly. Stand by. We're going to take you to Parramatta Park. We are just minutes away from the barbecue of the year, without a doubt. The King and Queen to arrive very soon. Our special coverage after the break returns. Welcome back to our special 9 News coverage of the Royal Tour, where King Charles and Camilla are in Sydney today. They are moments away from arriving at Parramatta Park, where there will be the Great Aussie Barbecue. And Royal commentator Victoria Arbiter is watching along with us this afternoon. Victoria, welcome back. In terms of planning a barbecue like this in an open space, who makes the cut? How do they decide who gets to be part of this?
Well, I think really it's all about celebrating the local community, ensuring that there is cultural diversity, including everyday Australians, also people that have really made a difference to their communities, whether it's through volunteering, launching initiatives, helping out people that perhaps need a bit of extra help around the house. There's a number of different ways that people can get involved in terms of helping their communities, and it's events like this which offer a way to reward those people, a way to recognise them and the sacrifices they've made or the extra effort they have taken to help out. And I think that's what the King and Queen are so eager to do. It's to meet the everyday Australians. Of course, on this tour, we've seen all the traditional hallmarks of a royal tour. Yesterday, we were watching together as a wreath was laid at the Australian War Memorial. They've attended church. They've met with local dignitaries, Indigenous leaders. They've done all of the things that you would expect to see on a tour. But I think at the heart of the King's desires, really, with this one, particularly given it is such a short visit because of his ongoing cancer treatment, it's to meet the people on the ground. It's to make an impact. It's to give them a moment that they will remember forever. And this trip in particular is historic in a number of different ways. He is the very first male head of state to be visiting and setting foot on Australian soil. And I think the King wants to make sure that he gets out and meets as many people as possible. And certainly this barbecue is going to afford him that opportunity today.
The snags on the barbecue already being warmed up. We'll come back to you very soon, Victoria, because Ruthven Williams is at Parramatta Park there, where all the action is taking place at the moment. Ruth, can you hear us? How is the excitement, the anticipation building?
Well, it's a bit of a party atmosphere here, Davina. Western Sydney has gathered together a bunch of 550 people. If it was a quick tour the King wanted, he doesn't have to go anywhere else today. The best of the best are right here in West Sydney. We've just been ushered into this holding area now. The King and Queen, we're told, are about 10 minutes away, and there is just so much here for them when they arrive. Murray Wilkinson here, he is set to put on a sheepdog demonstration with his two dogs, Colt and Meg. I'm sure that will be very much appreciated. And then I'm told there are some vegan sausages down on the barbie for the King, who doesn't eat meat for a couple of days a week. So everything is catered for them. They can do roam as they please around here. We're all very excited. There are some special guests as well, Davina. Detective Inspector Amy Scott. You'll remember her from the Bondi Junction tragedy. She was that heroic police officer that made such a difference on that day. She will be meeting the King and Queen here today, and we're really looking forward to seeing that. It'll be quite a special event for her here today. The Police Commissioner is here. It's all on.
We're looking at some aerial shots from above from the news helicopter of the crowd building there. It's a stunning afternoon there, Ruth. They could not have planned it any better if they tried, right?
Yeah, the Sydney Thunder have donated me a hat, so you might see that making a...
Oh, we've lost Ruth there, unfortunately, but looks like the motorcade is making its way there. As Ruth mentioned, they'd be about 5 minutes away. Choosing Parramatta Park is absolutely no accident. The whole point of the royal couple going there is to taste the multicultural diversity that Australia has to offer, not just in terms of the food, but also singing, dancing, cultural activities and everything from a didgeridoo performance to, as we heard, the sheepdogs performing Mediterranean and Vietnamese interpretations of food, and also some school children who get the very lucky chance to perform for the King and the Queen. Let's bring back Victoria Arbiter while we're waiting to join Ruth again. What we will see at the heart of this as well, Victoria, is average, everyday Aussies who would not normally get the chance to get close to royalty, but this is like a lottery win for them.
It really is. It's going to be a very special moment. I mean, I'm sure you remember yesterday when we were watching the crowds convene outside the Australian War Memorial, there were people who said they'd driven from Ballarat just to have a moment to meet the King and Queen. There were people who had taken their children out of school. There was one lady who was quite beside herself because she said, having just shaken hands with the King and Queen, she'd met 3 generations of royals. This is something that really means a lot to an awful lot of people. And I think, while I would never presume to speak on behalf of the King and Queen, they must be absolutely delighted by this incredibly warm reception they have received. Yesterday will have taken a huge amount of stamina to get through, and I think today is going to be similar for them. We do have to remember that the King is 75. He is undergoing treatment for cancer. The Queen is 76. The King turns 76 next month. They've travelled many thousands of miles. They won't have had an awful lot of sleep. Jet lag does take its toll, and there's the heat to contend with as well. But the British royals have remarkable stamina. When the late Queen came in 2011, there were a number of people that were trailing the tour with her, organisers, aides, security, and they all said they struggled to keep up with her. She was like the Energizer Bunny. She just kept going and going and going. And we've seen a very similar approach from the King and Queen. They really only had one rest day. They haven't had engagements in the evening, the idea being to give them a little bit of rest time, but they were on their feet for a very long time yesterday. We're going to see the same from them today. But I think they put personal comfort aside because, as you say, it is all about meeting those everyday Australians, people that have made a difference to their communities, whether they're first responders, volunteers, people that have made significant donations to help others. And it's quite right that they should have this reward today and a moment to meet the King and Queen.
It's almost as if the only downtime they really have is when they're moving between venues. But as I've been told previously, that isn't downtime. That's where they're quickly being briefed about the next set of guests that they're going to meet up with, their backstories, the significance of where they're going, just like an almost a refresher so that everything is front of mind. So when they pop out the car door, they can make every second count with the people that they're spending time with.
I'm so glad you raised this point because people think, you know, there are always going to be critics. There are always going to be naysayers and people that are negative, and some of the coverage or comments will say, well, the royals are off in Australia on a jolly, they're just having a holiday at our expense. But this is not a holiday by any stretch of the imagination. Similarly, the King and Queen can't just say, do you know what, it's getting a bit cool here in London, why don't we pop to Australia? It doesn't work like that. They are here at the invitation of the Prime Minister, and there's a huge amount amount of planning and prep that goes into a visit like this, not just from the aides who have come out a couple of times before to recce and to decide what it is exactly that the King and Queen are going to do, but the King and Queen as well. They want to know who it is that they're meeting. They want to have talking points. They want to use it as an opportunity to celebrate their patronages, to highlight various causes, and to be able to give back to the people that are doing incredible work. And in order to do that, you have to be educated about the people that you're going to meet. So yes, there will be a huge amount of prep that's gone into place beforehand, but then there is a quick cramming session in the car as well, people that are briefing them about who it is they're going to meet, what kind of events they're going to see, whether there are vegetarian sausages available, perhaps whether there'll be any more animals that might sneeze on them today. That alpaca has made global headlines. I don't think anyone had a bow tie wearing alpaca on their bingo card yesterday. But those are the moments that really create memorable scenes. I think the King was absolutely delighted. He thought that was hilarious when that alpaca just... can't hold in a sneeze.
It came out of nowhere, didn't it?
Didn't it just? But it was lovely, as was his response. And I think the barbecue today is going to allow for more photo moments like that and really provide opportunities that the lucky guests will remember forever.
As sunny and as beautiful and as fun as the barbecue will be, there will be some quiet personal moments for the King. And we've already heard from our reporter, Ruth Wynne-Williams. One of the people who've been invited to attend today is Amy Scott from the Bondi Junction catastrophe that happened earlier this year, the hero police officer who stepped in, who brought down the attacker. That was something that very much touched the King and the Queen, that they responded to. It made global headlines. The significance for them today to meet up with this police officer, to spend some time with her, to look her in the eye and to thank her for what she did, that can't be lost, that they've actually decided that this is one person they very much want to spend time with.
It's crucial, and it's a bittersweet moment. Actually, just as you were describing that, I mean, not to be trite, but I had goosebumps. You know, she was incredibly brave in a horrifying situation and a story that did make global headlines. I've been living in the US for the last 29 years. It was big news there, certainly across the UK. It was huge news, and rightly so, because it's those heroes that prevented something perhaps even worse from happening. So I'm sure today will be profoundly poignant, but also bittersweet because of the circumstances that have brought her to be there. But how lovely to be recognised by the King and Queen. And that'll be a private moment, I'm sure, where they share their commendation with her and their respect for her bravery and really what she was able to achieve that day. And I think that will be something that will be very special for her to go home at the end of the day and remember and I guess understand and appreciate that the King and Queen wanted to meet with her. It wasn't the other way round. It was the King and Queen reaching out, wanting to make sure that they were able to offer their commendation for her incredible bravery. They've
also been surrounded by the who's who of Australian politics in the last 48 hours since they've been in the country. Not all our politicians are monarchists. Many of them are very vocal Republicans. Premier Chris Minns is, of course, hosting the couple at this barbecue today. How do they manage that? Are they bothered at all by the fact that they have very vocal people who are against the idea of the monarchy that are hosting them?
They really don't. Yesterday's incident at the Parliament House with Senator Lidia Thorpe, it's not the first time King Charles has faced protesters. It certainly won't be the last. It was an unfortunate moment last night simply because he had just used his speech to praise Indigenous communities who he says has strengthened and shaped his life. He commended them for their stories and their culture that they have shared, the wisdom that they have shared, and how much he has learned from them. Just this morning, again, he was meeting Indigenous leaders. Indigenous leaders are people that, and communities, not just the leaders, that King Charles has really sought to embrace, and he has throughout his life promoted multicultural, multi-faith societies living side by side. He has promoted a sense of reconciliation and friendship. So to have yesterday hijacked as it was unfortunate. But the King, he has mastered the keep calm and carry on mantra, and while it did make global headlines, as we've seen today, there are politicians from both sides of the divide who have criticised the actions because it wasn't terribly constructive. Even the Australian Republican movement has talked about their desire to create conversations and discussions that they don't necessarily want to protest, because while that does get headlines, it doesn't further the necessary discussions that have to happen. And so I thought Peter Dutton was really very funny when he said that that people had been shining their shoes and pressing their suits, and that was just the Republicans. And that did get a good laugh from a lot of the people that were at Parliament House. And I think there is just a touch of magic that comes with monarchy. It doesn't matter. The late Queen was brilliant at disarming the Republicans. Even they admitted to falling a little bit in love with her, and I think the King has that same charm.
They're very much yesterday, their reaction, and I watched them on stage and watched it back in the hours that followed, they were almost curious, wanting to know the backstory. Like, you could see that they were asking questions. They weren't fearful or worried about what was unfolding in the Great Hall yesterday. That's a very standard reaction from them almost, isn't it?
Absolutely, and the King, he is a big proponent of freedom of speech and freedom of expression and people's right to protest. You know, he is a ceremonial figurehead. He doesn't have any power to speak of, but he does recognise that he presides over a democratic society and how fortunate we are to live in a country where we can protest and we can share our views. And Lidia Thorpe had every right to share her views. I wish she had chosen to do so perhaps in a slightly more constructive fashion, because unfortunately she set back the conversation with stunts like that. It felt a little bit self-serving. There are calls across the divide as well for her to resign today. That's not going to be everybody's viewpoint, but I don't think that's really what she was hoping for. But the King will want to know what the point was that she was trying to make. That his aides will have been warned that she has a direct approach. It would have been petty to leave her off the invitation list. They wouldn't have sidelined her, but she was there then as well in a position of trust, and I think people will have been disappointed, particularly the organisers, that she broke that trust, if you will, and expressed herself in such a fashion. But yes, the King will be eager to know what her viewpoint was, why she was expressing it the way she was, and is there a conversation that can be had as a result of that outburst.
It obviously followed his speech yesterday. We're hearing that he will be invited to address the audience today at the park, and we know that he loves writing his own speeches. So what would we expect from this, knowing that yesterday was very much a formal address of parliamentarians? Today it's an Aussie barbecue. How do you sit down and write a speech for that?
He is a brilliant writer, truly a masterful writer, and he's also very good at his delivery. You know, I don't want to be disrespectful to Queen Camilla, but he gave a speech many, many years ago when he was still married to Diana, the late Diana, Princess of Wales, and he talked about in his speech how he wished he'd been able to walk down the centre of the road and have his wife, have a wife on either side meeting the crowds, because she was so popular and no one really wanted to talk to him. He's brilliant when it comes to delivering a punchline. So I think what we'll see today will be a much more relaxed speech, one in keeping with the environment and the atmosphere, one that does display his sense of humour, because he does have a great sense of humour, which people don't always expect. They imagine that he's just going to be very, very formal, but that's not who he is at his core. He's got a wonderful quick wit, and I think we will see a little bit of that. But I think we'll also see, again, him talking about his affection for Australia, the Australian people. This is not just a throwaway comment. The King in 1966 spent 2 terms at Geelong Grammar, and he's since talked about the fact that that was by far the very best part of his education. He was 17 at the time. He said he went back with muscles that he didn't know that he had. But he's since talked about how that really formed the most wonderful, happy memories of Australia, and he has embraced Australians. He loves visiting here, and for the most part, he has received a very warm welcome. But the rest of the royal family has too. They love coming here. They like the outdoorsy lifestyle. They love the Australian sense of humour, and they've been very grateful for the warm reaction that they typically receive when they visit here. And I think he will allude to that in his speech today, and he will thank people for the incredibly warm reception that they have received over the last few days.
A warm and sunny reception indeed, Victoria. We're looking at pictures now of Camilla arriving there at Parramatta Park, obviously waiting for the King to arrive as well. Warm and sunny, and yet they're not wearing hats, which was an issue my 8-year-old asked about. Mummy, why are they not wearing hats out in the sun? Is that an issue?
Well, how brilliant, though, that your youngsters know how important it is to wear a hat. Yes, King Charles was wearing his sunglasses yesterday, but no hat, which is probably a rookie mistake. But coming from the UK, they'll be so excited to actually see the sun shining. I can see why they might want to just be open to the sun. They're not spending too much time out in the bright sun. Fortunately, they were in the shade yesterday at the Australian War Memorial. But this is a good opportunity to remind viewers how important it is to have hats and sunglasses and sunscreen, particularly given the harshness of the Australian sun.
I had a very worried 8-year-old worried that the King may have got sunburnt yesterday, but looking at the pictures today, he appears to have come up okay. Victoria, we'll come back to you in a second. Let's go to our reporter Ruth Wynne-Williams, who is standing by at Parramatta Park. We are watching the convoy of cars arrive there. Camilla, of course, arriving separately to the King because they're both involved in separate engagements today. They are meeting up here at Parramatta Park to join for the barbecue. Ruth, is there a sense there among the crowd that the guests of honour are arriving and the excitement is building?
Can you see just over here behind me, people have sort of lined two sides of a makeshift pathway that they've formed through the crescent at Parramatta Park here. There is so much on offer for their majesties here today. There's barbecues, there's ice cream, there's sheepdogs here behind me, school children who we met the other day. They are going to be performing cultural dances, and it's a real opportunity for him to sort of I guess, whip through a lot of our community here in Sydney's West at one time. Everyone here is really excited to meet him. The Premier and his wife Anna are hosting today, but there's just such a wide swathe of community members. If it is the community that Charles wants to meet, then it's all right here for him today.
Well, he is officially meeting the welcome party there, if you could call it that. As you mentioned, Chris Minns is hosting this barbecue today. He's there with his wife Anna Minns. You can also see to the right of your screen there Prue Carr, who is the Deputy Premier of New South Wales, and also the Education Minister. So she has spent the morning with Camilla, of course, at the Green Square Library before moving here today. So a common friendly face to catch up with there. Official welcome to country and smoking ceremony for the couple there at Parramatta Park. Also part of the official entourage there is the Honourable Tara Moriarty, who is the New South Wales Minister for Agriculture and Regional New South Wales. Important to point out because this will be a showcase of the regional sustainability and the regional produce that we have in New South Wales. Mr Peter Agnew, who is also the President of Surf Lifesaving New South Wales, very important to come along today to raise the awareness of Aussie beaches and the safety in our beaches. And Mr John Bennett, who is the President of the Royal Agricultural Society of New South Wales, who is also part of the welcome ceremony. Of course, Sydney very famous for its Royal Easter Show, so perhaps this will be a little mini show, if you like, because we've got the sheepdogs there, we've got a buffet of different food and also different cultures and different age groups as well. Young students who've been asked to come along today to perform for the King and the Queen. They'll get a chance to meet them. You can see that they're part of the greeting. We do have some aerial shots also coming in from the helicopter that'll be a bit clearer for you to see the just how casual and relaxed this is. They'll move in there, and as Ruth mentioned, there's different stalls and different spots for them to stop and get a sample and taste of everything Australia has to offer, from the ice cream stalls to the barbecue, vegan, pork, beef, all the sausages you could ever ask for. We mentioned Surf Lifesaving New South Wales volunteers. They'll also be there. They're on the barbecue, raising awareness for the work that they do in our community. We do know that the Premier will speak very briefly, acknowledging the guests who are there today, and he will invite His Majesty to address the audience that's been invited along. Amongst the people who've been invited, we haven't got the official guest list yet, but we've been told that they are people who excel in their fields, as well as school children from Greater Western Sydney. Among the group will be students from Canley West School in Sydney, and community leaders from various different religious organisations and community groups. But this just a meet and a greet, a chance for them after the official dignitaries have had their moment, the who's who are there to say g'day. It's now just a formal, informal chance to move along the line, and there's obviously no hurry there as well. They've got as much time as possible in the next hour or so to soak up the sunshine and enjoy things as much as possible before they tuck into a snag or two, possibly, and then see some of the best entertainment. The crowd there that you can see building as well. Let's bring in Victoria Arbiter, our royal commentator. Victoria, these scenes are actually reminding me very much of when we saw Harry and Meghan in, I think it was Dubbo, when they were here for their tour of Australia. It was an Aussie barbecue. It was pouring down rain, so it was different weather, but it still had that community feel of going to almost the salt of the earth of the community to just rub shoulders with people and have a nice afternoon.
It really is, and it's so wonderful to see that people can get so close to them. There's very few world leaders, really, that I can think of, very few, that would allow people to get as close, or that the security and police teams would allow to get so close. But that's the way the British royal family has always been. They know that it is important that security is around them, and you can be sure that they are the very best of the best, incredibly well trained, and they are observing everything. But they don't like the security to impact on the moment where those regular people are having an opportunity to rub shoulders with royalty. And I think what has been really remarkable about King Charles's reign in particular is that he is very receptive and open to a hug. We've seen numerous times on engagements wherever he's been across the UK, certainly when he was in France and Germany as well, that he is quite happy to have somebody reach across the barrier and give him a big hug, shake hands, put their arms around him. That was something that people didn't really do with the late Queen. There was a slightly more formal approach with her, but he's been very hands-on, and we can see that just in his natural way with people. He's very easygoing with them. He's always got a quick quip with something that they might say to him. Yes, of course, they're chatting about the weather as well. But I think it's just a wonderful opportunity to meet with regular people and to really have a glimpse into what their world is like, what their society is like, and to be able to celebrate the things they like to do, which in this case is a great Aussie barbecue.
The point had been raised at the start of this tour that having him being treated for cancer at the moment, there would be perhaps a question over how much interaction there would be with the public, knowing that any sort of infection can risk his own health. But there hasn't seemed to be... The Queen there provided with some flowers to put in her hair and lapping up that moment. The kids seem to love that. Victoria, but also he hasn't held back, has he? There were concerns that this might impact his health somewhat, and yet nothing has stopped him from getting up close, personal, touching people, holding people, giving them a hug and spending time with them.
All very legitimate concerns too, and again, I couldn't speak for his doctors. I haven't spoken to his doctors. They might be watching, feeling a little bit anxious about quite how interactive he's been. We don't know the type of treatment that he's currently undergoing, but yes, anybody who has experienced cancer or been through cancer with a loved one or seen the harshness of the treatment would say that probably shaking hands and hugging and being close to so many people isn't exactly advisable. But I take this as a good sign. I think it would indicate that he's doing well. The fact that doctors cleared him to come now, yes, the scope of the tour was greatly reduced simply because it would be too much stamina-wise for him to be going on to other countries in this part of the world. This tour is also much shorter than a traditional royal tour would be to Australia. But I think the fact that he's been able to engage with so many people really will have lifted his spirits as well. He wouldn't have wanted to come here and had to be behind barriers and behind ropes and separated from the people that he loves to meet. King Charles loves meeting people. It is just really what gets him going. He gets so excited being able to interact with people of every different age, every cultural background, socioeconomic background, faith background. It's wonderful that there are multi-faith leaders there today. That is something that he has really tried to support in terms of communities living side by side. And that's what a barbecue does. It brings together people from so many different backgrounds, whether it is faith, whether it is culturally, whether it is ethnicity, and it brings people together. It's a great leveler where they can interact and enjoy each other and leave all the baggage behind. And if you can do that with a king, well, it just goes to show that perhaps we can live side by side and enjoy each other and celebrate each other in our day-to-day lives as well.
We're trying to be a bit cheeky and try and eavesdrop on their conversation that they're having here with the surf lifesavers. It looks like they're from Coogee Bay, judging by the back of one of those volunteers. Let's see if we can try and have a listen in on their conversation.
I don't make the board. Hello. Pleasure to meet you. Tell me about it with you. How are the sausages coming?
They've been doing all the cooking. I don't know, what are they, beef?
We've got his bread, barbecued onions,
Sounds like he's asking about how the sausages are, Victoria, and whether he takes onion with them as well. He's obviously curious. He might actually sample one, are we thinking?
I think he might, or dare I say it, I haven't been in Australia too long, but there's a particular sausage that you get at weekends from a certain store that I wish that the King was having an opportunity to try one of those. There's nothing quite like an Australian sausage in between some white bread. So I highly recommend he does that. Someone gave him some Tim Tams yesterday, which I'm hoping he dipped in his tea when he got home, because that's good. But yes, it would seem wrong to go to a barbecue and not sample one of the sausages today. You do them particularly well.
Also on the agenda, we're hearing that there'll be a bit of a backyard cricket game hosted by the Sydney Thunder. Will he engage in something like that, do you think?
It'll be interesting to see if he does. Certainly, if this were Prince William, he absolutely would be having a go, as would his wife, the Princess of Wales. We saw in India that she was right on the cricket field when she had a go at batting during their tour there not too long ago. For the King, certainly in the past, he's always the first to be dancing, trying his hand at sport. He's been very athletic throughout his life, much in the same way as his late father, Prince Philip. But we don't know how fit he's feeling, given he's been undergoing cancer treatment. So it may be something that he decides to just step back and watch the pros have a go. But he'll certainly enjoy it from the sidelines if he's not able to.
OK, let's try and have a listen, because it sounds like they're going to try and at least turn the snags in the barbecue. Let's see how they go.
Yeah, hot coals this morning.
Briquettes and charcoal, lump charcoal, yeah.
Perfect, Your Majesty. And Your Majesty, if you could look this way briefly. Sir, you wouldn't mind looking briefly this way, thank you.
Victoria, I'm not convinced Charles knows what he's doing. Looks like Camilla is much more handy with the tongs.
She does look a lot more capable, doesn't she? I'm actually quite surprised at the King because, as I mentioned before, the royal picnics and barbecues up at Balmoral, the stuff of folklore, really. But having said that, it was always Prince Philip who was in charge of the barbecue, so perhaps he didn't pass on the necessary skills to his offspring.
The pool need to come back. Yeah. Your pool.
The crowd is really quite extraordinary there. And can we talk a little bit about the entourage that they move with? Because that's part of the story and what we see unfold. It is so well choreographed, isn't it? In terms of they have security that surrounds them. They have their own aides and personal assistants that are with them as well. But they don't encroach on the space. You can't see it from our shots, and you certainly can't feel it when you're there with them, that they're heavily surrounded by a sizable staff and entourage there, aren't they?
They are, but it's very important, and you used absolutely the right word, Davina, about encroaching, because that's what the royals would hate that. If anybody felt that there was sort of a us and them style approach, it's all about being able to engage, to be able to look someone in the eye and to be really personable with them. And again, there's very few heads of state that would be able to be this close up and personal, but it's something that's always been important to members of the royal family, those opportunities to get out and meet members of the public. It was in Australia and New Zealand, actually, that the phrase that really is not being used so much anymore, but the walkabout was invented, so to speak. It was the Queen was coming here for a visit, and she said that she wanted to have a much more hands-on engagement and approach with members of the public that had been waiting. There was a feeling that it would make them that much more accessible, and that people would be able to identify with them more and have a more personal interaction. And it proved to be so popular that it is something that has endured now through many generations. And I think they're always the standout moments on any royal tour. Now, you can be sure that they've got the very best security around them. Certainly, the Australian police force are not going to want anything to happen to VIPs on their soil, whether it is the King and Queen, whether it's the US President, whether it's a Prime Minister or President from anywhere around the country. They are trained to do this, and they do this impeccably well. But again, we'll also have the police protection, the royal protection officers that will have come from the UK, who again are very well versed and very well schooled in terms of being present, but being able to step back just far enough that they're not encroaching on that interaction.
And how do they scope an area like this? I've certainly watched where American presidents have come to Australia, and to secure a scene like an open area like this, the work that goes on is incredible. It gets locked down, and every drain, every corner, every post is checked just to ensure that this area, once it's locked down, it is safe.
And it's so important to do that. Obviously, you know, the security services will be listening to chatter. They'll know sort of how high a terrorist threat might be. But you can never be sure about the lone wolf, the person that wants to have the world's media paying attention to a certain occasion, and they then take advantage of that because they want the notoriety of causing trouble. It was back in 1994 that someone shot blanks at then Prince Charles when he was here. He appeared completely unruffled. He sort of straightened his cufflinks. It was like a scene out of James Bond while the security services tackled the perpetrator. And so there is an awful lot of planning that goes into this. Much of it the security services won't talk about because it's not knowledge that they want the average person to have. They're all highly skilled, highly trained, and no stone is left unturned when it comes to keeping any VIP safe. Of course, nobody would want there to be an incident on their soil during a visit that is being watched by the world's media.
I know you spoke a little bit about the walkabout made famous by the Queen, but this feels like something completely different. It's far from a walkabout, it's actually a walk with the people. They've made a real point, and I don't think I've ever seen Charles and Camilla as hands-on with the public and as so immersed in the space with members of the public as what we've seen here today. It is very much of the William and Kate scenes and the Harry and Meghan scenes, and yet this is the monarch, this is the King and Queen with not a care in the world. There are no barricades there. They're just in amongst the people. You are right where you said you'd be hard-pressed finding any other world leader, any other monarch who would be this close and this personal with people, and yet they are two of the most famous people in the world.
I love that phrase, the walk with. You've perhaps coined a new royal phrase because that is exactly what we're witnessing here. Now, of course, everybody that is there today will have been pre-screened. They know that the people they are surrounded by are there at an invitation, and everything has been covered in terms of the people that are immediately around them. Still, you can't take any chances, but it just speaks to the confidence that they have in the security services and in their own royal protection officers, that they feel comfortable and relaxed enough to just interact with people like this. It is really a testament to who they are as well, that they're not running scared, that they're not too anxious to get out there and just be in and among the people. This is what they both like to do. We've seen at numerous walkabouts in the UK since the King acceded that he is going straight to the people. Sometimes he's being ushered along by senior aides that are saying, so we really do need to get going to the next engagement, otherwise we're going to be late, because royal timing is of militaristic precision. But I think this is really an opportunity too for people to get a sense of who the King is. He has been berated over the years, and I think unfairly maligned. People have criticised him for his climate change views. Of course, there was such love for his late wife, Diana, Princess of Wales. He has been castigated, chastised, painted as the baddie for so many years. And of course, there are so many parts that make up every human being. I think there have been mistakes on everybody's part as well. And so this is a really wonderful opportunity for people to see who he is, to get a sense of that great sense of humour, and to see how much he cares about the people that he is interacting with. And I think he, in turn, is creating really memorable moments for each of the people that are lucky enough to shake a hand, get a quip, get a nod, get a laugh, or to be able to just share a quick second in their presence.
We know that so much planning and attention goes into an itinerary like this, that for them to pay attention to the causes that are close to their heart, but also to give a nod to every aspect of the community. And we saw that certainly with the military focus yesterday and the parliamentary and the formal dignitaries that we saw unfold yesterday. Today we'll see them later on Sydney Harbour, and we'll get those iconic shots with the Opera House and the bridge behind them. Today what we're seeing right now was supposed to be, I guess, acknowledging the multiculturalism of Australia, but it also feels very much like a bit of a nod to rural and outback Australia too. It's like an old-fashioned town show almost that they've set up there. That would be deliberate, wouldn't it, as a nod to rural and outback Australia?
Absolutely, and I think this has been designed specifically because the King and Queen, given the short length of visit, they've not been able to get out to some of those smaller rural communities that they otherwise would have loved to visit. In the past, royal tours to Australia have been upwards of 2, 3, 4 weeks, which really allows them to get around the country. You have a massive country and communities, some of which are quite difficult to get to, and I think the King would have loved to have been able to get out there. He has simply had to reduce the scope of the tour on doctor's orders because he is still undergoing treatment for his cancer. So the fact that he hasn't been able to get to the rural communities means they've brought the rural communities to him. And what a lovely way to recognise them, to celebrate this quality produce from all across New South Wales, and to recognise the people that he hasn't been able to get out and meet this time. People have also been describing today as an opportunity for Australians to bid farewell to the King and Queen before they hit the next stop on their tour. And also the Prime Minister had previously said that this visit, short as it is about showcasing the very best of Australia. And while it has been quick, I do feel like they have been able to achieve that. And this is really an opportunity, as you say, to recognise those rural communities and encourage people that might be coming here that haven't been able to get out there to kind of pique their interest and say, well, goodness, that looked like a really wonderful way to spend the day. Maybe we should get out there beyond the sort of city centres that people typically visit.
It's obviously mass saturation here. We can't get enough of it. How does this play out overseas in terms of American media, but also in the UK? It's wonderful advertising for Australia, but how much are they absorbing and seeing apart from the Lidia Thorpe scandal that we saw yesterday?
I think people have been enjoying it thoroughly. In fact, the King and Queen were on the front page of almost all of the national newspapers in the UK. And as you say, this is the value of a royal tour because it is a fantastic tourism ad. People will be looking and watching and thinking, well, gosh, I want to go to Australia and see whatever it was that sort of kind of rocked their world that the King and Queen might have done. This is playing out in the US as well. Certainly, it's been covered on the morning shows there. A lot of the US publications, particularly People magazine, have been featuring stories and pictures. The sneezing alpaca has made a huge dent in terms of global coverage. People have been very excited by him because those are the moments you can't really choreograph. You know, the late Queen and Prince Philip famously always loved it when things went wrong because, of course, they would turn up to something and there was always a fresh coat of paint, the leaves had been raked, everything was looking pristine, the grass would be perfect. But if something went wrong, that was what gave them an opportunity to kind of break the formality and have a bit of a giggle as well. It gave them something to talk about at the end of the day. They're always very conscious of the efforts their hosts have gone to make everything perfect. It is appreciated, it is respected, but of course it is fun when something does go a little bit wrong and kind of veer off schedule or an unchoreographed moment. But yes, it's been getting a lot of traction around the world, this visit.
As long as nothing goes wrong, that's what we're really hoping for, but we love the moments that are unscripted and unchoreographed as well. So much planning has gone into this, and different stalls lining Parramatta Park there, showcasing the multicultural diversity of the community. We know that you can see the flags of the different nations surrounding the park there. So much focus has been put on the Sanger and the Aussie barbecue stall that will be cooked up by the Surf Lifesaving volunteers. There are also Vietnamese and Mediterranean barbecue stalls where they have the Rice Pantry and the Miska Parramatta group will be forming those groups. There'll be also a sample of the multiculturalism and regional produce. The Messina van, the ice cream van, is there. There's some artesian sheep, milk, dairy and cheese produce from the Parocca Dairy in Robertson. There's also a host of olive oils and syrups and jams from an estate near Mudgee, grass-fed and finished beef and pasteurised organic chicken and eggs from the food farm in Wyong Creek. So a whole buffet of produce that I guess Victoria, everyone is hoping, willing that will they sample a little piece of it. And yet we heard yesterday from some of our commentators, technically Charles doesn't eat lunch. Is that correct?
Typically in the past, he hasn't. It's been reported recently that he has started eating lunch, and this could be because his doctors have said you need to put on or keep your weight on. We don't know the type of treatment that he has been undergoing. King Charles is an absolute workaholic, so I think for him previously he's thought, who has time for lunch? I'm going to work through lunch or have a little nibble as I continue working. But I think as you were reading out all of those food samplings, they all sound utterly delicious, but they too really speak to the King in terms of his interest in organic farming, organic produce, food that hasn't been processed, food that is all natural and comes straight from the farm to the table. He loves all of that stuff. And actually, just too, as you were talking about all of that, I was thinking that Australia really does have some pretty impressive bragging rights now, because this is, of course, the King's first visit to a Commonwealth realm since his accession. You had Prince William, baby Prince William and baby Prince George make their official tour debut here. Harry and Meghan revealed that they were expecting their first baby on Australian soil. And now you have the King's first visit to a Commonwealth realm. And I think we do have to throw credit to Australia. You have laid on a fantastic visit for him. And I think when he flies out onto the next leg of his Southern Hemisphere trip, he's going to be really thrilled at all the things he had a chance to do, everything that really is of interest to him, and to have all of these organic farmers there today and that food to table type produce is something he's going to be particularly excited about. I think they might be hoping to leave with a bit of a goodie bag.
It's absolutely certain they'll be getting that. We forget as well, we get so caught up in the moment here and see them move from person to person to person. There is a jam-packed schedule ahead for the next few days, travelling through the Pacific, but also in the next few hours as well. They'll be moved on from here for the King to attend a sustainable market initiative discussion. Can you tell us a little bit about his interest in that and why that would be put on the agenda for him?
Oh, for years and years and years, sustainability, sustainable markets has been something that the King has worked really hard to promote. And I think people are finally listening to him. He recognised that in the past it would get a bit of an eye roll. People thought that he wasn't the right person to be speaking about these types of topics, but he is so incredibly educated on the subject. He's very articulate. He really has put his money where his mouth is, and he has sought to promote sustainability across so many setups and factors, and I think this was really important that he get this in today as well, just ahead of them leaving, because he knows that any type of visit that he goes on is going to command global headlines and get the front pages, and so if we can be talking about sustainability, he is further promoting that message. And he has recognised actually in recent years that people have said actually we should all be listening to then Prince Charles the King, because he does know what he's talking about, and he's able to convene the people that are able to further sustainability and to be able to bring the right people together that can further promote it and talk about the topic. So this will have been very important for him to do. Then, of course, we're going to have the iconic images at Sydney Opera House, where there'll be a chance to meet more regular, everyday Australians. They'll be conducting a review of the Royal Australian Navy, the fleet review. This is a lot of time on their feet. There is not going to be much room for them to sit down, but I think they're just going to keep going and going and going and going. They can collapse later tonight before they move on to Samoa tomorrow.
They'll sleep well. There's also, before they even get to the harbour, there are 3 more events that they have to attend between now and 4 o'clock this afternoon. One of them is that he will spend some time, King Charles, at the Melanoma Institute of Australia, and I guess that's a nod to cancer patients, to the research as well that's undertaken in Australia, and the goal that the Melanoma Institute has to reach 0 deaths from melanoma in this decade. He'll be meeting with some of the Australians of the Year who have dedicated their lives to this research, and he'll tour the facility there, look at the diagnostic treatment. That will be very personal for him, knowing the journey that he is undergoing at the moment as well.
Yes, King Charles has done a lot of work with cancer charities over the years, but it's a much more personal visit now, not just because of his own cancer, but because his daughter-in-law, the Princess of Wales, has been undergoing cancer treatment as well this year. It was quite shocking that the two of them should receive diagnosis within a very short space of time, and it's a journey that they have gone on together, and they've been a tremendous support to each other. So I think, yes, this will be very personal, but I think it's fantastic that he's going to highlight the work. As you mentioned, two professors that have been named Australians of the Year. Their research is said to be groundbreaking, and I think he's going to be very eager to learn more about it. His first public-facing engagement after he had taken time off earlier this year to commence his treatment was to a cancer hospital. He became patron of the Macmillan Cancer Trust. This is something I think that he is aware that he can raise and highlight further awareness and the need for this type of research, because of course research leads to, or awareness leads to research, leads to hopefully ultimately a cure, and it's very important that we continue to talk about this. There are so many families around the world that have been touched by cancer, and if we can really start to reduce those numbers, and if he is able to encourage people really to research the options available to them. Just after it was announced that he was going into hospital for treatment for an enlarged prostate, we didn't know he had cancer at that time. The NHS said that searches on their websites spiked a massive amount simply because people suddenly were curious, well, is this something that I need to look into? Sarah, the Duchess of York, had a similar experience when she announced her breast cancer diagnosis and then later her skin cancer diagnosis. So I think the King recognises that if he has this platform and he can encourage people to go and get the necessary checks so that then they are getting treatment, perhaps because they had been too scared to go before, if they can then be getting treatment for symptoms that they had been too scared to acknowledge, well, that's a win. And that really is very encouraging to him. So I think this is, yes, very personal, but also very important that he go and meet these professors.
And the one other item on the agenda before he hits the harbour this afternoon is the King's Foundation reception. That's very personal for him too. The King's Foundation, he says, provides holistic solutions to challenges facing the world, and that he's championed a sustainable approach to how we live in our lives and build our communities, running diverse programs of education and training for all ages and backgrounds. Not too much detail has been given about that particular item on the agenda, Victoria. It is a case that he will be speaking with people who are connected to the foundation here in Australia. How will that work?
Yes, I would imagine that's going to be the case. You know, the King's Foundation, the King's Trust, has done tremendous work in countries way beyond the UK and a number of other Commonwealth countries, and its work is really been impressive. It's helped so many people. It's helped initiatives get off the ground. It's helped individuals that perhaps have needed grants to further their own education or to set up their own businesses, to promote sustainability, to raise awareness of climate change. Again, these are all buzz points. The King's interests very much at the forefront, but these are issues that affect all of us. There has been criticism in the past that the King isn't the person that should be speaking about climate change because it's too much of a political issue. But it's, yes, there is a political side to it, but it's a human issue as well. It is something that is affecting all of us. So if he is able to use his platform and his resources to raise awareness, to convene the right people to address these issues, well, we all benefit from that. You know, it's very easy for the armchair experts to sit back and criticise and say he shouldn't be dabbling in this, but thank goodness he is dabbling in it, because it means that we are finding solutions to problems that perhaps otherwise wouldn't have been addressed.
And we are talking about it today as a result of him being in the country today to raise awareness about this. So it looks like we're moving on to the sheepdog testing and performance. How much experience will he have in this regard? It is as Aussie as you get, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is, but he loves dogs. The Queen in particular is a mad dog fan. In fact, her two rescue Jack Russells are the first ever rescue pups to have lived in the palace. The Queen, of course, or the late Queen, her corgis were all pedigrees, but Queen Camilla in particular just loves her dog, so I think she'll particularly enjoy this. The King is a huge proponent of farming, organic farming. He oversees the royal estates. So I think this is all skills and exhibitions and displays that he's going to be very keen to see, and for other people to see, for them to see what goes into farming, that your food doesn't just turn up in the supermarket neatly packaged so that you can go home and cook it, that there's a process to how it goes from the farm, how it is grown, how it is raised, and how it makes it onto the shelves. And I think these are skills he's keen to promote, because there are so many skills that are just sort of falling by the wayside because of how industry and technology has taken over. And so it's this back to roots basics that he in particular really enjoys, and I think those dogs are going to be a delight.
I can vaguely remember about a month ago he was looking for a shepherd for his sheep on a property in the UK, and the requirement was that the shepherd needed their own dog. So this could be a job application, Victoria, could it?
It absolutely could. I mean, why not? I'm sure there's an Australian or two that might like to come and live in the UK for a little while and exercise their skills. I don't know how they'd feel about the weather year round, but yes, it'd be wonderful to... we've had, many an Australian has come to work behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace or on on British land. They've come to use their skills. We've seen Australians involved, certainly in the coronation. They were involved in the funeral ceremony for the Queen. A number of Australians have made an impact in the UK, and so why not bring over the dogs to help herd the British sheep?
The report that I'm remembering, it's Sandringham Estate was advertising for a skilled shepherd with at least 2 years' experience to tend to the monarch's 2,000-strong flock, and the shepherd must have their own dog. So this very much could be, if he hasn't filled the job, it was about a month ago he was looking for somebody, it could be the chance, as you said, the weather's a little bit different. But he would appreciate as well having spent time on outback stations in Australia, because many times that he's visited here and spent time in Australia, the importance of dogs in those environments. They are very much a working member of the staff on those farms, but they are also companions for them.
Absolutely, yes. It's important to remember they are working dogs, obviously very well taken care of and much loved members of the family as well, but these dogs love to work. They've got a huge amount of energy. This is what they've been bred to do, and they do it very, very well. And I think the King is going to admire enormously that relationship between the dog and the handler, and how well they work together in order to get the sheep going wherever they need them to go. There's a tremendous amount of skills, years of training, skills that are passed down through family generations, farms that have been passed down through family generations, and I think that's something that he in particular is going to appreciate, because while it's on a slightly different scale, they have farming lands. The royal family has farming lands that has been passed down through the family. All of them have become very knowledgeable about how to work the land, what grows on particular land, what they need to do in order to grow the very best produce, to raise the very best livestock, and so these are the types of engagements that the King will be paying very close attention to see what is being done here that perhaps could be done at home as well. What skills can he take back and put into use on the Sandringham estate?
And these are the pictures that are almost iconic as what the Harbour Bridge will be later on today. These are images that the world will lap up, won't they?
They absolutely... Well, the sheep don't look terribly thrilled, do they? But I think the dog is doing some very fine work there, and his handler can be very pleased that it's been a job well done, because, of course, you don't want to fall on your face or egg on your face in front of the King and Queen. This all appears to be going very well indeed.
But it's uniquely Australian, isn't it? They couldn't go to the outback, they couldn't go to Bourke or travel to outback Queensland, so this is the outback coming to them and showing the very best, and they're appreciating it.
They really are, and the King has had experience in the outback, and we talked a little bit before about the time he spent at Geelong Grammar. It was at their bush campus that he was working and really put through his paces. Prince Harry spent time on a cattle farm, sheep farm out in the outback, and he worked incredibly hard. He loved it. It was away from the cameras, it was physical manual labour. He was up before the sun came up, worked incredibly hard throughout the day, and then fell into an exhausted sleep at night. He made friendships there that he has maintained throughout his life. They appreciate this, and I think this is a really very creative way to bring the outback to the King and Queen, because they haven't been able to go themselves, in part because this visit is particularly short, but also because the King is undergoing ongoing cancer treatment. So what a novel way to be able to show the world that is watching this tour other parts to Australia that have come to the city but are really showing the very best of what what is outside the city.
I love we've got Premier Chris Minns there being behind the lens there, taking the photos for King Charles and some young kids there alongside the sheepdogs. You mentioned Camilla has the rescue dogs, and the Prince and Princess of Wales, their pet dog is very much part of their family. What about Charles? Does he have dogs as well?
Oh, he's always had dogs, but I think this is very much his wife's domain with the Jack Russells. But the King has had Jack Russells throughout his life. There have been Labradors. They're a very doggy family. People say you're either a cat person or a dog person. The extended British royal family are all about dogs. They love animals in general, but I think there's nothing quite like the companionship of a dog, particularly when you occupy a position none of us could possibly identify with. I think it's why the late Queen was so drawn to her corgis, because everybody stood on ceremony around her, perhaps other than her husband, whereas a dog just treated her like any other person. And she really used her dogs to help her in various situations. There was a famous story many years ago about a British doctor who had been working out in Syria, in Afghanistan, had seen some truly horrific things, things that no doctor should see. He was volunteering his time in war-torn areas, and he was invited to a lunch at Buckingham Palace, and he was sat next to the Queen, and she said to him, he had just returned, I think it was from Afghanistan, Syria, and she asked him about his time there, and he said he became absolutely tongue-tied. He couldn't speak because he thought if he started to speak, he would start crying. She recognised that immediately, and she pulled a tin from the table that had dog biscuits in it. She gave him some dog biscuits, and together they fed the corgis that were under the table. And she said, there, I think that's always better when you've got the dogs with you. What a remarkable ability to recognise what was going on with an individual. And in that moment, she was able to lighten the mood. They fed the dogs together, and then he was able to regroup, pull himself together and enjoy the rest of the lunch. And so I think they recognise that dogs, they're a great leveller, they're a great companion, and they've enjoyed many dogs throughout their lives.
Let's see if we can take a listen here, because they're obviously having some very special moments with members of the public who've lined up, who've been invited to come along today. And as we mentioned, there are wonderful high achievers in this group, but there are just average, everyday members of the community as well who have come along for a chance to meet the King and Queen. This was just a few moments ago where Charles and Camilla were given a taste of the abilities and the talents of sheepdogs, and a uniquely Australian experience, and a taste of the outback right in the heart of Sydney, if you will. Ruth Wynne-Williams has been watching along as well. She is at Parramatta Park for us. Ruth, where are you in relation to the royal couple?
They're just over my left shoulder, Davina. It's a very exciting moment. They're speaking right now to some of New South Wales' most crucial volunteer workers, the Rural Fire Service, and also the SES, the Volunteer Rescue Service. Members of that group are here today too. We've just seen, we were up quite close while King Charles and Queen Camilla had the sheepdog demonstration. They were clearly quite taken by that. A chance for them to get up close to country Australia while still being in a big city, while keeping this tour so incredibly tight. This is a really special moment though for these brigades behind me. They've been queuing in the hot sunshine today. I can tell you the weather forecast is 24 degrees, but it feels like 35 here today. It's very hot work for the King and Queen right now, but they're just slowly making their way around this crowd. Compared to other visits on this tour, this one they do seem to be taking their time and spending a lot of quality time with people rather than ripping through like we saw them do at Federal Parliament yesterday. They've met school children, as you've seen. This is right at the heart of what King Charles said he wanted to do when he came to Australia, spend time with the community and really get a feel of what is happening sort of in our communities here in Australia, and he's doing that today. And it's a beautiful day. It really does feel like a light-hearted party atmosphere. There's quite an informal vibe here today after the pomp and ceremony of yesterday, and I guess that will be quite refreshing for them as well. It is a lot under this hot sun, and Davina, it's a lot ahead of the Opera House this afternoon. So they'll be continuing around this way. There's an ice cream truck over there. They might want to stop there as they go past, but they've still got a fair way to go before they can make their way out of this event.
And it's looked like he's moved around along the line there with the SES there, where they, one of the female volunteers seemed to have a little mascot with her, where she tried to give that to him. Looks like they might be talking to the Sydney Thunder team at the moment. There's someone with a cricket bat there at the moment, and look,
yeah,
if politics
Dave Warner is there too.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, Dave Warner should be in there. He was right here while they were looking at the sheepdogs earlier. He was right here with his camera getting as many snaps as he can. It's even for some of the most well-known people in our community, it's clearly a big event for them here today as well. So it's just a really nice, light-hearted event, and I'm sure for the King and Queen, you know, these are the events that they remember. These are the moments on the tour that will stick with us, and while it's certainly memorable for us on the ground, I know that they'll be feeling like they're getting a real taste of Australian life as well.
Ruth, it's certainly been a reversal of roles for many people there, including the Premier. We're watching him. Look, if life in politics doesn't work out, he could be a royal photographer. He's being handed a lot of cameras in the last hour or so, where he's been asked to take photos. It's really quite extraordinary for us to see leaders in our community. The Prime Minister was the same yesterday, being told, "Oi, take a photo of me with the King."
I've been enjoying that too. In fact, one of the British press pack, while the Premier was waving his camera around before, said, "Oh, who's that?" to me. I said, "Oh, that's the boss. He's got a lot on today." So yeah, he's, for a Republican, Davina, he does seem to be having the time of his life with his wife here today. But how could you not? It feels like a school fair or something. There's so much here, and it's a lot of fun, and both the royals do seem very relaxed today, if not still a little bit tired ahead of their Samoa journey that they need to embark on. And the sun, like I said, it is really hot. It will be putting them under the pump here, but they're just handling this crowd so extraordinarily well. I spoke with Danny and Layla Abdullah. They are the couple whose family was involved in that awful Oatland tragedy years ago. They actually talked to me about travelling to Canberra yesterday. They had the opportunity to meet His Majesty yesterday, and Danny told me a quite wonderful story of Googling what to do when you meet the King before you meet him. And I said, "Oh, did you bow, Danny? Did you have a bow? How was the execution?" And he said, "Oh, Ruth, I stuffed up." Yeah. He said that he called His Majesty something like Your Honour. Yeah. He said, "Great to see you, Your Honour," or something like that. And he said he corrected himself, and it was a lovely moment, and that the King did seem to laugh. But that was a nice anecdote. And look, for a tour that's been so tight, just a few days in Australia, which is different to tours we've seen in the past, those moments they're having with people, everyone that we are coming across, everybody does seem to have a really lovely story. You know, he's incredible at conversing with the crowd and asking people questions about themselves and making them feel seen as he moves along, and that's exactly what he's doing here today. I cannot wait to talk to our Premier, Chris Minns, after this, to hear just exactly how it's been being up close and personal as the master works the crowd. But yeah, they're taking their time here. A few people have said they've managed to keep to schedule so tightly on this trip, but at this event, with the community, with the farmers, with the charity workers, with our rescuers, when you know, disasters hit our state, they're spending time with them here today, Davina. There is no sense that the royal couple needs to rush off.
Well, we're looking at the time now, wondering when they will have to move on, because their next event is scheduled in about an hour's time. So, Ruth, we are anticipating as well that there may be some speech and some address of the crowd there. So we will come back to you very soon. Stay with us. We'll have more coverage of the Royal Tour when we return after this short break. We are taking you back to Parramatta Park in Sydney, where there's a community event being hosted for the King and Queen in Sydney. They are about to address the crowd. We'll take you there now and hopefully have a listen.
Dad, I need you to do something for me today, and that was to say hello to the King and the Queen. So on behalf of Anna, who is 8 years old and at school today, I very much would like to welcome you to Australia and also here to Parramatta and to the Premier's Community Barbecue. Please join me in welcome to the stage His Majesty King Charles III and Her Majesty Queen Camilla. The Honourable Chris Minns, Premier of New South Wales, and Mrs Anna Minns. The Honourable Prue Carr, Deputy Premier of New South Wales and Minister for Western Sydney, and Mr Brad Hulls. It is now my pleasure to invite the Premier of New South Wales to formally welcome our guests of honour.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. And we thank the Darug people for welcoming us onto their lands. For all of us today, what a great honour. We get to tell our family and our friends that we had a barbecue with the King and the Queen. It's not the kind of thing that you'll easily forget. Your Majesty, this might be your first visit to Australia as a sovereign, but it's certainly not your first visit as a friend. For 60 years, you've been coming to our city and our state, and in that time, you've witnessed the latest chapter in the long story of change that's happened in Western Sydney. That story starts in ancient times as the home and hunting ground of the Barramadigal people, then prior to self-government as the centre of farming and agriculture in New South Wales, and since then, in our lifetime, the heart of multicultural Australia. In the same way that the British Commonwealth pulls together 56 nations into a single body, Western Sydney has stitched the world into a single community. And without being too immodest, I think it's an example to the world of how we can live together as one people despite our differences. That success is built on our citizens, on everyone here today, but it also comes from the principles and traditions of British democracy and British law. Parliamentary sovereignty, government by the people. And now because of these strengths, we're a country that stands for freedom and hope around the world. Friends, on Sunday morning, His Majesty visited our state parliament to recognise 200 years of self-rule in New South Wales. And he gave us a very thoughtful gift, and from my perspective as Premier, a very useful one too. He gave the parliament a new hourglass timekeeper, in his words, to encourage brevity in speeches from politicians. So you don't cheer that. So Your Majesty, I'm going to follow this lesson, say thank you to all for coming here today, and a special thanks to the farmers and the Royal Agricultural Society who fed us this afternoon and who continue to deliver the best produce in the entire world. Thank you. You've all been invited here because of your exceptional contribution to this state. So please join me now in showing how we welcome guests in Australia and how grateful we all are to have His Majesty in our country. Please welcome His Majesty.
Premier and Mrs Minns, Deputy Premier and Mr Hull, and Matthew Doyle, if I may say so, for the moving welcome onto the beautiful lands of the Darug, people on which we're gathered today. So thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I knew I should have brought the egg timer along with me, just to check that I didn't go on for too long. But having visited Western Sydney on a number of occasions over more than 50 years now, from Liverpool to Richmond, it is always a particular pleasure to return to the neighbourhood. And that is why, if I may say so, I am so delighted to be here in Parramatta, an excellent choice for a community barbecue, since Parramatta was a place where First Nations people from around the region also came together for generations to meet and trade food. So it's a particular delight to see and smell all the top tucker here today from Western Sydney's vibrant and diverse community. Ever since I first came to Australia, very nearly, can you believe this, 60 years ago, to attend school in Geelong, and also to hack my way through the bush country around Mansfield in Victoria, the generous spirit of Australians has always made me feel welcome and that is true again today. So my wife and I are really glad to be back in Sydney, but especially pleased to be here in Parramatta for the first time. It is also a great joy to renew my long association with the Royal Agricultural Society of New South Wales, which for more than 200 years has carried out such outstanding work to champion the farming community and the production of the highest quality produce. As we are happily rediscovering today, New South Wales farmers continue to produce truly outstanding food and wine. It is no wonder, I think, that Sydney is world famous for its cuisine, whether it's smashed avo, a pav or a cab sav, and that is what I hope has been on display. Now, ever since God almighty, they've done 2 pages of this bloody thing. Right. This is killing me. Anyway, I must say it is a real pleasure to have this chance to try this produce, but also, crucially, to meet the people who make it happen, working tirelessly in all seasons and all weathers, and developing an intimate understanding of the importance of caring for nature and making it part and parcel of their endeavours. So being here in Western Sydney also gives me an opportunity to see at first hand what I've heard about before, and that is that Parramatta and the region around it has become one of the most dynamic, enterprising and culturally diverse communities in the world. And I just want to particularly acknowledge the community leaders and volunteers who are here today and who contribute so much to Western Sydney and beyond. As I said when I was in Australia back in 2012, our volunteers are the glue which holds together such a diverse, energetic and determined society. I always have the greatest admiration for them and the wonderful work they do for their communities. So thank you, everyone, for coming to join us at this Barbie today. And more particularly, thank you for the contribution you make to your local communities and beyond. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. There we are. No, we're getting that. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, we'll watch and see what happens from there. A wonderful speech by the King, who probably went a bit off script there. I can't imagine, God almighty, they've got 2 pages of this was part of the scripting that was part of that speech, but perhaps the fatigue starting to take a little bit of its toll on the couple in their 70s who have been moving at an incredibly fast pace. As we said, this was a community barbecue that was to showcase the multicultural diversity of Sydney and specifically Parramatta, but it was also a chance to nod at the outback and the farming communities and the diversity of the agricultural communities that make up New South Wales and all of Australia, and to showcase their produce. Ruth Wynne-Williams is there for us watching along. Ruth, I'm not sure how much you could hear from that. The viral moment of that speech might be, God almighty, they've got 2 pages of this.
How does that compare to talking about animals' unmentionable bits in his speech yesterday? He's had a few hot moments on this tour, I think. We couldn't hear very much. I was talking to some of the members of the Sydney Thunder cricket team. They were telling me about the time they got to spend with him. I asked them. He said he didn't like cricket when he was at school, so I asked them if they asked him to have a bowl. They said no, he didn't have a bowl today. They didn't get to check out his skill, but they were very excited about meeting him. The crowd can actually hang around now and enjoy the whole setup here for the next hour or so after the King goes. So it could turn into a bit of a party here. They had a DJ playing before he arrived, quite different to the cultural show that was put on for him. But yeah, he's done really well with the crowd here today. Both the King and Queen have. They're very good at informal occasions like this, and you heard that in his speech. He's able to joke along, and you know, he's known for writing his own speeches and then he's calling it out for being too long. You can't win. But it is a tight tour, so maybe he overestimated how quickly he'd get around the room. But he's spoken in the past himself about how much he loves Australia. When he was at school in Victoria, he said that he really learnt to become a little bit Aussie, I guess, not in so many words, but that's what he said. So roaming this crowd today, he would have been able to test out his skills and see if he's still as Aussie as he thinks he is. They really turned it on for him here. He was really taken with the sheepdogs. That was great to see. He's got his own Jack Russells at home, so perhaps he's missing those dogs, but he spent a bit of time here, enjoyed the sheep. And there are a couple of children there who live on that farm near Mudgee, I believe. And look, we watched them throughout the morning, Davina. I don't think they knew exactly who was coming, but it was a really sweet moment when he had his picture taken with them and chatted to their dad for a bit and met the beautiful dogs, Meg and Colt. But from here, he's still got a jam-packed afternoon, we know. You know, he's met so many people here today.
And we're looking at some of the highlights here, Ruth, that we've put to air in the last hour. And just in the last few hours, they have crammed so much into their day, whether that a floral crown for the Queen or turning snags on the barbecue, those iconic images of the sheepdogs. They've given a quick nod to everything Aussie there this afternoon, haven't they?
Yeah, and I think he'll be really chuffed on that. You know, the thing about a speed tour of Australia is he probably didn't know where he was for the first half of this trip. Well, there's no question now what part of the world he's come to. This was unquestionably Aussie here today. I'm told, and perhaps you guys can tell me because I was down in a fixed position, and just to explain how it works, when some media gets to roam around with the King and Queen approved media, and there are other media that get stationed at different parts of the event, and I was stationed at the sheepdogs. But I was told that you can tell me, Davina, did he cook a sausage or not? How was he on the barbie?
I've got to admit, Camilla upstaged him. He had the tongs out and he wasn't exactly sure how to turn them, which the Victoria Arbiter said it was a bit of a surprise knowing that the royal family are so famous for their barbecues, and it was Prince Philip who was quite often the cook in the household. He would have thought it would have passed that on to Charles, but Camilla clearly knew what she was doing. It was Charles who sort of turned a couple of snags and then walked away. We didn't see them sample any of the produce that's been on display, but what they have sampled is some of the extraordinary culture and the diversity that we have in Parramatta. And it was really lovely for him to acknowledge Parramatta's past, that this is a place where people came to meet and trade food, and the top tucker that was on offer. And yet he revealed he'd never been to Parramatta before, Ruth. Of all the times he'd been to Australia, and particularly Sydney, Parramatta is one place he'd never been to. So it was important for him to be there today.
That's extraordinary, because now it'll be a place that he will never forget. I don't know if you can see behind me, but these are beautiful school children. I met them the other day from Canley Heights Public School. They have been practising, Davina, for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they didn't know who they were going to be performing for today until a couple of days ago. I was there when they got told, and they were so excited to hear that they were going to be performing for Their Majesties today. I haven't managed to catch up with them to find out just how fast their hearts are beating now, but they were sampling the ice cream before they took to the stage, so they've been having a great day. And I think that's what's been key about this event, and what's been really beautiful is that while it's been a place where the King and Queen can come and make their way around and really get a feel for our communities, it's been an event for the public too. For these 500 or so invited guests, they've been rewarded for their community service. It's all been turned on for them here today, and to be part of it and to watch that's been really beautiful.
And lots of community members there, but also some of the extraordinary achievers in our community as well. You spoke to Naomi Fox as well, one of our Olympic superstars. Did she get to have her moment with royalty?
group. Next up is the Islander
Yeah,
dance.
she did. I asked her what it was like because she's obviously got nerves of steel. She takes on the world. And I said, what was that like for you? And she said, oh, Ruth, I've already met him before. So, no, she said it was great. She enjoyed meeting him. Take a listen. I believe you've got her soundbite there. How was that for you? What did he say to you?
He actually asked me a lot about my career, about Paris, about the sport itself, natural rivers as well, and artificial. So we had, a really long exchange, but it was really nice to meet His Majesty the King. Didn't quite meet Camilla, but it was a lovely day, and what a beautiful, time we're having here in Parramatta. So really cool. Yeah.
What was he like in the flesh?
Naomi Fox speaking there with our reporter Ruth Wynne Williams, who got up close and personal with the King just a few moments ago as part of that community barbecue event in Parramatta. Well, next stop for the royal couple is, of course, Sydney Harbour. Spectacular scenes to come as they inspect the royal fleet. We will have all those highlights for you. Coming up in the afternoon news, of course, we'll be tracing their movements in the next couple of hours as well. They're to meet with the Melanoma Institute and also the King's Foundation, so plenty more still to come. I'm Davina Smith. Thanks for your company over the last few hours. We'll have more coming up very shortly. See you soon.